What's anime? Um, I want to talk about fear. I'm not sure if this is. I don't know how much time I've got to be able to speak on it, but regardless, I'm gonna do a full video about fear because I've been noticing lately that and not even just lately, just in general, it seems as though fear is really like affecting many people. I won't say everyone because absolutism is weird, but there's a lot of aspects to that specific carnal response, and I want to touch on as many of them as I can, because we all feel it at some point. We all have to wrestle with it in different ways, in different points, but one of the differences that I'm noticing lately is that there's a lot of really heavy manipulation attempts currently using fear. And my standpoint overall is I try to remind myself of what I've been saying lately, which is, my kind of staunch position that this is not real. This isn't, a real place. And that's intuition. That's going off of intuition with my own experiences, but also the things I see. Some of them are comical. Many of them come out later to be shown to be fake. I have many reasons for thinking that, and then there's text from a couple of different civilizations and disciplines to kind of support that. But fear is it's useful. It's there for a reason. I feel like it's very, very difficult to be able to make sense of what's, quote, natural and what's not. Especially when it comes to the being, to the self. It's layered, There are layers to it. I think we're all kind of struggling with that. Those of us that pay attention to consciousness and philosophy and the overall being. And what doesn't help is that there are dozens and dozens of campaigns. Some have been in effect for decades, some for what could be seen as a few centuries, and some very recent, I think recently there's been a push, a concerted effort to confuse us all. And that usually would just be kind of aimed at those that are in the, quote, truth community, those that are trying to pay as much attention as possible, those that are trying to find the truth about themselves and about this realm. But if you peek your head in on, like politics or social issues like gender stuff, relationship dynamics, what do you see? Because what I see is a lot of confusion, a lot of narratives being pushed in very specific directions, algorithms, and the early days of social media, you saw this thing start to form called echo chambers, right? And you could kind of get stuck in them if you allowed yourself to not have an open mind. If you only wanted to hear what made you feel comfortable or what made you happy, or what kind of solidified something for you in opposition to something else. But now it's almost as if you're being kind of nudged or pushed into echo chambers algorithmically. In some ways, just period. Depending on what you look into. And I think even on a more grand scheme of the play of the act, much of it doesn't matter, and not even necessarily on the level of, oh, this is a simulation, so none of it matters. Or I guess it is kind of that. It is kind of that. Like, the two sides to the two potential wars that are being heavily, heavily covered and pushed and staged right now. And I do believe they are both staged. And by staged, that does not mean fake. There are definitely, not definitely, because I'm just seeing videos. I'm reminding myself of that every time I can, too. There are apparent deaths, I haven't spoken to anyone personally that has had anyone die in either of these skirmishes, these countries. So for me, it's 50-50. It's very important to remember that we're getting all of our information from the internet, and the news is no better. The news might as well be the fucking internet. So realistically, and I say this with, any due respect, not all, any due respect, that for all we know, there could be nothing really going on in these other countries. An example of that would be North Korea. North Korea is heavily, heavily censored, not just digitally, but their lives, apparently, supposedly, that's what is pushed in our direction, is censored. They supposedly don't have internet capability, from what I've seen, supposedly at all. There's a possibility that they maybe only have local internet, like, very, very built just for their region internet. I would say that would be a possibility. But as far as that goes, to me, that means that we don't know anything about North Korea, they could have the best situation ever and just not want anyone to come in and fuck it up. Because if you look at the influence of these first world countries that go to these other countries, and I'm not saying whether or not Korea is or isn't, just look at the catastrophes that happen from first world countries going into Africa and trying to drain it of all its resources, of using its people, its citizens, its beings as test subjects, as slaves. Why would anyone want that to come into their country? So it's just as possible to me that you could see North Korea realize that very quickly and say, you know what, we're going to make them not even want to come here. We're going to, create an aura of don't fuck with us military-wise, and we're going to, for the sake of those that maybe are just curious, it's not pleasant here. You don't want to come here because it's not pleasant. And I've thought about that before, and a reason that I thought it could be feasible, it could be potentially the case. It's at least one of the options. They brought a chick on Joe Rogan who said she defected, she escaped from North Korea, and it just felt very, very contrived and not very believable, personally, for me. And again, that's not to say that I know specifically anything about North Korea. Just I'm trying to keep a healthy level of you don't know shit. I remind myself of that quite often. And within me not knowing shit, I try to keep as much of an open mind as possible. And I try to keep it as logical while also being intuitive, you know? And for some reason that helps me to not fear things nearly as much. And going back to those two wars, you know, I have kind of like a rule for myself where anything I see pushed heavily in as many venues as possible, at the very least something is sketchy about it. And those two situations are no different. The fact that they're trying to get those of us here to pick a side in a situation that we realistically have, you know, we don't have a dog in that fight. It doesn't really matter. They just pull on your heartstrings, you know, and they manipulate your perspective, your vantage point on what you think is going on there. When in reality, most of the time when this happens, in fact, every time that this has happened, it's done in the same way. You're given information that's usually not true to get you to pick a side and support that side so that legislation can be passed to do things that are usually, you know, illegal, war crimes, deplorable, despicable. And then it comes out later, very little is done about it. Maybe some reparations are given if things are so intense. But even with that, the reparations usually end up being given to some that are questionable. Questionable, to say the least. In fact, in thinking about it in this moment, I could be wrong, but in thinking about it in this moment, the only ones that I can point to that have been given reparations, my studies have led me to understand that they are not the agreeable ones in those situations. And, you know, one of them potentially you could say, you know, from a vantage point of things being staged and not fake, so there were actual losses and things like that. But overall, that specific group, you know, they're the aggressor now. They're the aggressor now. And they've been the aggressor previous to the situation that they're getting reparations for and that they've received reparations for. I'm speaking as cryptically as possible so that this video can stay up. But if you know anything about history, you know who I'm talking about. If you know anything about current events, that should kind of solidify who I'm talking about. But, you know, again, I can't point to a situation where the society, the group, the people that have been given reparations, if you actually dig and don't just go with the narrative that's been given, you find that they are not as, quote, innocent as, you know, you're being led to believe. In fact, many times they either agreed to appear as a victim, or they, you know, they participated and did things to others and then got to appear as victims. For instance, I'll use one that's not so touchy a subject, Japan. And more specifically, you know, I'll say those that are in this country did not do the things that Japan, you know, did, you know, during World War II. Obviously, they were here. And World War I, I believe, is more specifically what I'm referencing. World War I. I'm honestly, there's a couple of different situations, but they were rounded up here and put into camps, which is horrible. So you know what? Without knowing the specifics, I'll say that could be a group that very probably deserved reparations. So I stand corrected. But even within that, like, did they come from other countries? Did they? History is so weird. History is so weird. Anyway, um, I guess my overall point in that is that fear is being used to manipulate to a level where we're unsure of so many things. You know what I mean? Like, even just within me trying to like make these couple little points at the top of this video, I'm going through these cycles of like, well, there's this, but oh, there's this. That is a part of the Rockefeller Manifesto. And I kept thinking to myself, oh, they're starting it up, they're getting it going. They have been for the last decade or 2 decades or something. But the reality is they've been doing that this whole time. Look at Vietnam. Everyone was so behind as far as like understanding what the dynamics in politics are, that they just, did that and lost. And then anyone that spoke out about it was seen a specific way, which was also infiltrated by an agency. The hippie movement, the protests and all that stuff. Most of this is staged, man. Most of this is staged, and fear is a heavy, heavy dynamic in that. I'm noticing a lot of beings arguing. And I think that even that, you could say, comes from a place of fear. Even if you point to the arguing back and forth about, who has what role and responsibility in relationships, that's just a fear of not ending up happy or in a good relationship, quote unquote. And a lot of the points that are made don't even come from that being. Usually they come from someone else who is likely an influencer and, pontificates very stylistically in a video with some light music in the background. They're wearing their fresh shit, like, the manipulation is heavy, and if you're going off of personal experience with your position on that topic, then that's all you can go on. But most of the time, when a person continues to talk on that, they start to name off reasons and details that don't come from them. One could say, oh, I've had lots of bad experiences with dudes, and then immediately start naming off, I want a 6-figure salary, I need to be taken care of, so on, so on, so on. I'm not trying to get bogged down in the details of that because that becomes the argument. But on both sides, there's a lot of delusion. There's a lot of delusion. If you go back far enough, even within history that can be told to you verbally from those who lived it, the arguments that are being had right now about relationships are warped. It's warped. Both sides are warped. A relationship is a partnership back and forth, and you just don't necessarily see that because everything is so warped. And those that are trying to have the kind of relationship that could be seen as like, a rational, logical relationship where it's a partnership and you both have a say and you both get to make each other happy and so on and so on. All of the logical things. Generally, it's just one person trying to have that kind of relationship. And it seems to be that those are so few and far between that it's improbable that they find the other side to the yin yang that also wants that, which is sad. And man, sidebar, I wonder if there's a correlation with those that want and attempt to have real relationships, like classic, logical, all this stuff I just said, relationships, and us. Do you think it's us that are the ones trying to have regular relationships, generally speaking? Because I do believe that even though there's a difference between us and non-personal consciousnesses and low state consciousnesses and all those different variations, I do still believe that there are those of us that have flaws. I don't think we're perfect by any means. So I mean that to say, like, one of us could still be like not good in a relationship, like not a good being to their partner or whatever. I don't think that that's not possible, which I kind of think is being perpetuated a little bit, whether it's spoken or unspoken. I think that's being perpetuated. Anyway, these things seem to come from fear, and then they're perpetuated and pushed by these little fucking scrying mirrors that we all hold. That's more of a joke. I don't know if it's a fucking scrying mirror. Even that could be some fucking fear shit, to be honest. It starts off with a potential trauma or a fear, which both are based in fear, and then algorithmically shit's pushed at you. And I think it's important to remember this technology is spying on you at all times, and most of us aren't aware of what that really, really means. You think it just means they want to know if you're jerking off or, what stuff you like to buy. But the technology on these things are far more capable than that. They can measure your where your eye is on the screen, how long you look at a specific region of the screen. When you're scrolling, it can tell when you stop. It obviously logs what you tap and click on. It can measure your eye movements. It can measure your eye dilation, which denotes certain emotions and responses, like. And then this stuff is broken down. And so it builds a profile of you, and that stuff, the biometric stuff, along with what you say online and what you said in the past and what you've declared about yourself on taxes, all of this shit creates a picture of you. And then that picture is subverted and used against you. So, potentially speaking to the fact that they, know what makes you happy, know what makes you fearful, know what makes you upset, what makes you mad, what you long for, and that makes it possible to push specific shit at you, And when I say they, I'm not speaking to anyone specifically, because again, I very much view this as a simulation. I get pretty regular indications that there is some sort of sentience behind that. Not saying it is actually alive necessarily, just that, you think it's not monitored. It could be monitored depending on who you are. But I get indications of that. And so, I just think that it's very, very necessary to remember that fear is being used, that these other emotions are being used also in very, very, intense, concerted campaigns to make you feel certain ways, to make you do certain things, say certain things, act certain ways. And again, it used to be more prominent just within these little communities, very specific communities, I would think anyway. I could be wrong. Maybe it's been like this for a long time. But now it seems to be everyone, you know, and it sticks to whatever lane you're in. If you're on, you know, relationship dynamic shit, it just pushes that stuff at you. If you're on political shit, it pushes that shit at you. If you're on, you know, consciousness or truther shit, it pushes that at you. And this goes all the way down to you know, artificial interactions. I've talked about this before, but artificial interactions, and same thing with that manifesto. It's very confusing because the capability that is current, you could be talking to, you could be texting, you know, not talking necessarily with a fake person. You could actually be talking with a fake person. Like, it's heavy. You could be video chatting with a fake person. I ranted about this before. I don't know which video that is, but these are capabilities that are not secrets, but they're not broadcast. They're not advertised. If you know where to look, you can find the evidence of them. You can go friend a celebrity right now under a different name. They have a different name, and it's AI. And, you know, it'll potentially, I don't know how much, but it'll interact with you. It will DM back and forth with you, I'm assuming. You could probably video, you know, video chat with it. This is current technology, and it's very likely not old, or not new, I mean. You know, I think there's some Kardashians that have done this. There's some pop stars that have done this. They just, you know, I would say they sell their likeness, but they might not have owned their likeness for a long time, or they might not have owned it ever, you know? And I don't say these things to create fear. I say these things because, for me, once I realize some of this shit and go find information that's like, oh shit, you can just go talk to a... So that means that they can make fake people, you know? When I do those things, it makes me feel better. Because in the end, I can't know the answer to many of these things, but at least I know that they're possible. At least I know that there's the possibility of being manipulated, the possibility of being, you know, other stuff that does just come off as fear. So I'm not going to say it in this specific video. No, what? Fuck that. That's fear too. Gang stalked. You can be gang stalked. Like, these are things that do happen, and if you're unaware, this is why I should say it. If you're unaware of them when they're happening, it squeezes that much more fear out of you. If you're unaware of gang stalking and you're being gang stalked, that's way worse. It's way worse when you don't know what's happening. When that shit started, you know, I was so scared. And it was after a very specific situation where a show of force and might had just been used on me, and through means of, you know, the appellate system, I got out. But soon after that, you know, it's almost as though I'm being threatened or you know, tortured in a way. And it made me so fearful that I was going to be put back in there, you know. I can still feel that fear. I don't have it anymore, but it can be just as real to me right now as it was then, because I just didn't understand what was happening, you know? This is a strange place, man. This is a strange place. And one of the things that contributes to that is, if you don't have any experience with what I just talked about, your initial thought is potentially, oh, this dude's crazy, or oh, this dude, you know, like whatever doubts or opinions may rise. It's generally because you don't have experience with that, and that's okay. But I think more empathy could help us out a lot more in these situations. Empathy and you know, respect for differences of opinion, and you know, differences in experience. You may not have gone through what I've gone through. I may not have gone through what you've gone through. And that has created and tailored and, curated a different being. And so things that are important to you may not be important to me. Things that I will do, you may not do, and vice versa. That's just what it is. And it's being utilized, against us. One thing that I've said a lot in earlier videos is this place is both retarded and genius at the same time. If it were purely genius, then none of us would realize that we're potentially in something that we don't understand. Meaning, talking about simulation theory or just the overall we're being lied to type narrative that some of the kind of more softer truth seekers and whatever you want to call the circles kind of lean more toward. It's, in any sense, it's both genius and moronic, ignorant at the same time. And, I find it interesting that is specifically how Yaldabaoth is described. He's a creator, but he's a fucking idiot. You could take that as allegorical or literal. However, it still has the same philosophical meaning and weight. But I say it's genius because, man, you can't escape a lot of these things directly. If you're tired of the way that your country operates, depending on where you're at, you're not given the option to not participate. You're not given the option to just go somewhere and be. It needs your participation, and by it, I mean this, not just your country. This thing, this place needs your participation. That's one of the things that all of this points to for me, and it's one of the reasons that it kind of relaxed me. My shoulders relaxed when I realized this. Oh, all of this is because, for whatever reason, you need me. You need me to respond. You need me to react. You need me to feel fear. You need me to feel anger, to feel lust, to feel all these things that potentially come natural, at least to this avatar. But, I have a feeling that there are things that I just have feelings about. I don't have much to support it. One of those things is that we keep being told that we need to get rid of our ego and our emotions are not real. When we're not in this body, we don't feel emotions. I don't believe any of that shit, brother. You know what I mean? Fucking look at the gods, the representations of the gods. Do they seem like they don't have emotion to you? They eat, they fuck, they marry, they have children, they war with each other, they love each other, just like we do. I know I've said that stuff before, but, sometimes I feel like I gotta repeat something if it goes with, with what I'm thinking in the moment. And if you're aware that you are a divine being, then I feel like you're being groomed to shed parts of yourself, and you're being told that it is the true you. You're being told that the divine version of you wouldn't have emotions. The divine version of you would only care about self and not have balance within that, and care about self but also care about others. All of these things that are being pushed, they're sketchy to me, though I always feel as though I can learn more about myself and about my surroundings and everything. I also have a deep feeling of knowing myself now, at least. And I've always kind of had that, but it's complex. You can know yourself, but then also learn more about yourself. But one thing that's been kind of uniform throughout my entire life is I don't like being told what to do. I don't like being told what I am or who I can be I don't like being told what I can and can't change or transmute about myself. I'm down for learning if you want to position it like that and not push me in any direction specifically. But once you start trying to push me in a specific direction, I get sketched out. I get like suspicious of what motivations are there. And what I've noticed is that there are so many things trying to make you believe you need to be a specific way or that you need to participate in certain things. And that's always going to be your decision, not anyone else's. Especially if you are us, if you have that spark, what sense does it make for a divine being to be told what they are or who they are or what, they can and can't do? It's you're taking in information and making your own choices, your own transmutations. That's what it should be, And I think there's a lot of stuff out there right now that's trying to like shift that into something else and make it to where you're learning from something else what you should be, who you should be, how you should act, who you should be around, who you should listen to. And it's weird, and more specifically when those that do it don't understand when you're like, yeah, I don't like being, this seems weird, and they don't get that you can see it. That feels weird to me, I don't know, because it's just so very obvious. At least by a certain point. Like once I hit a specific point and I'm listening to something or, I've even had some like kind of in life, try to push me or pull me in a specific direction. Once I realize that's happening, dude, my whole, position and demeanor changes. And, the fact that can be done without knowing, I took a step too far. It's very weird. Very weird. Could be intentional, I guess, but I don't know. Doesn't matter. None of this shit should be feared, man. And fear is being used to make many of us think that if we don't find a specific vibration or if we don't find a password or a song or a melody or just all these things like the real truth about consciousness. I just personally, I don't think that it matters in that way. I think that they're natural inclinations that we want to know more about because of how this place is and you want to know how it could be. It's always nice to know what could be and I think that that's been subverted in a way, like creating busy work with, you have a consciousness. Don't you want to know how that works specifically and how it came to be and all these other things that you won't actually get a definitive answer for? And it's not to say that these things can't be discussed, debated, talked about, researched. But in the end, what do you end up having to do to get the answer, quote unquote? Intuition, So, I don't know, man. It just seems to me that there's so much manipulation that's being used to create these scenarios, to create these narratives, and this busy work that I wonder how many see it, how many are aware of it and conscious of it. Because it's a very big theme for me right now. And I have multiple big themes, obviously. But I don't know. It's just, to me, it's important to be aware of this. And I'm going to think more on it because I want to talk about more. I think I'm kind of talking in circles. This is maybe a pregame. I don't know. I'm not even going to call it a pregame. Just fear. I'm going to talk about fear more. Hopefully I spoke of this in a way that is beneficial. I'm not trying to like freak anybody out or make anybody upset, angry, or any of that stuff. If you would like to donate, contribute to my research on other projects that are less philosophical or philosophical, the PayPal link is in the description for the channel description, not the video description. Maybe it might be in the video description. I've been putting it in there sometimes. My email is gammaauobsidian@gmail.com if you have any like suggestions or thoughts or just want to say what's up. Instagram, same name, gammaauobsidian. But yeah, I'll be back with more thoughts, maybe structured thoughts. I just, yesterday I started thinking about how much fear is being used and wanted to talk about it and didn't get to start till today. But I have more thoughts and I'll be back with them. I love you, da. Bye.